And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever and whenever you are, and welcome to another episode of Take the Points, a true underdog podcast. How's it going, everybody? You have Robbie here. And I got to say, the tagline of the podcast, a true underdog podcast, probably has never been as true in our history as it is tonight. And why is that, you ask? I have been teasing this episode for weeks. We have an incredible guest on the show, my one and only cousin. We got Garrett Tyler on the show. Garrett, welcome to Take the Points.
Thank you so much. It's been a long time coming, but really excited that tonight's here and can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, I am super excited to have you on the pod. So you may be wondering, who the hell is Garrett Tyler and why is he on Take the Points, an underdog podcast? So Garrett Tyler, close friend of the show. He is actually a back-to-back national champion in men's basketball. Garrett had the honor and privilege, right, of playing for the Florida Gators prior to these UConn Huskies these last 2 years, the last team to win back-to-back NCAA championships. And to put that into perspective, how unique it is, the guest that we have on today, which G, and I will refer to you as G throughout this podcast. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there has only been 15 total teams in the history of the NCAA men's and women tournament that have won back-to-back titles, 9 men's and 6 women's. That means roughly 150 players out of 950,000 can get on a podcast and say that they have won back-to-back national champions. That puts you at the 0.0002 percentile. So I just want all our listeners to know what a privilege and an honor it is to have you on the pod, and just really looking forward to kind of hearing your story. But were you aware of these stats that existed, or did I just blow you away right there?
Not aware of those stats, and I appreciate you throwing that out there. But it's definitely an elite, exclusive group. Very, very unique experience. I'd love to get into it with you, but definitely an opportunity that I look back on and in so many different ways affects the rest of my life since then. So it was a pretty special opportunity, and we made the most of it. That's for sure.
Hell yeah. I always look back on those years fondly. And I think we obviously been wanting to do this episode for a little while. I think we felt like with March Madness going on right now, basketball is top of mind for everybody, rightfully so. Your Florida Gators are on a hell of a run right now, right?
Hey, they're the real deal this year.
Do you think we brought some positive karma to the Gators by setting this podcast up and they're on a roll, or what?
Absolutely. But hey, we've got the Gators, we've got Texas Tech that my wife went to Texas Tech. We've got Michigan, we've got Michigan State. Yeah. We've got a lot of good basketball to watch in March here.
I love it. And that's why I just felt like this was such a great time to do this podcast. And just for kind of a preview of the show for everybody too, we're going to just kind of see how long this goes for. This is kind of, I'd say, like kind of a special episode for us, just because it's more of an in-depth profile of Garrett here. Definitely want to start of just hearing, a little bit about your story. And like I said, this is an underdog podcast, and we've always thrived ourselves on, 3 underdog guys from an underdog city talking about underdog sports. And that's kind of the premise of why this podcast was founded. And I think your story, like I said in the open, just totally captures what it is to be an underdog, to ultimately rise to the level of a, back-to-back national champion. And there was hurdles and turns and I'm sure moments of doubt along the way. But when you're able to persevere and get into that mountaintop, I think that's what hopefully motivates others. And I think, Garrett, that's what makes your story just, I think, so incredible. So I'd love to kind of start. So obviously, like I said, I kind of gave it away in the open. You won back-to-back national championships with Florida, which is awesome. But you didn't just wake up and instantly, attend Florida and, join the Gators basketball team. But your kind of athletic prowess, I want to say, started off really from a young age, obviously knowing you so well and then just kind of doing some research on you. But so you end up playing for Florida, but take me through kind of growing up. Rumor has it you were a pretty hell of a baseball player too. I believe, did one coach tell you you're making the biggest mistake of your life not playing baseball?
That was part of the story. So, I played all the sports growing up, couldn't play them enough, lots of soccer, lots of baseball, lots of basketball. Played baseball and basketball through high school. But there was a point my junior year where I really decided to narrow it in on basketball and just play basketball exclusively at that point. But that's exactly that conversation that my baseball coach had with me. My dad, backing up, he was a pitcher at Michigan State, loved everything there was to love about baseball. And I was a pitcher myself, starting pitcher on the varsity team my sophomore year, leading batting average and, on base percentage sophomore year. So, a lot of hope coming into junior, senior year. But at the time I was also in a very demanding academic program in high school. And just with all three of those combined, didn't feel like I had enough time to pour into all three of them. So baseball was the one that fell off the list. But when I let that coach know, he did tell me that was the biggest mistake that I was making, and I was going to regret it the rest of my life. 4 or 5 years later, I was hoping to be able to run into him again and tell him that wasn't the case, but haven't had that chance yet. But
well, hopefully he's listened to the pod somewhere today.
You never know.
Maybe the Take the Points listeners, maybe this will find him. And, obviously, I think what you went through growing up. And again, for those that obviously do not know Garrett here, he's 6'7". So this is a premier stature to be an athlete. If you can imagine, I mean, when you were younger too, I mean, your size, I'm assuming just from the gun was a major factor as well. Right. I mean, obviously, 40 years old now, but back 25 years ago, I'm sure you were still the tallest in the field there.
Yeah. No, it was always the case, and it was always an advantage, but really once I was able to focus in on basketball and finish out that senior year, there were a couple opportunities in there to play some D2. And mentioning that academic program at the time, that was getting through high school with that program behind me was a lock for anybody getting, that certificate essentially to get into Florida. I'd been a lifelong Florida fan, watching the football and basketball games growing up and always wanted to go to Florida. So when I had the choice between going to Florida essentially just for academics versus going to a smaller school for D2, playing ball there, it was more appealing to me to go to Florida and have that college experience. So I really feel like over the 5 years that I was there, I had a well-rounded blend there, because that first year, true freshman, doing all the things that freshmen do to, get acclimated to college and playing intramurals. We assembled it's got to be a legendary team, the freshman squad we called, and all of us had D2 offers. All of our guys were 6 foot plus. All of us were dunking, and we absolutely dominated intramurals. It was a blast. We still talk about it today, actually, but there were a couple points in there that led to some connections with the Gator team that were unique, I guess, good opportunities to cross those paths. One of the teams that we destroyed in the semifinals in the intramural tournament was the team of Gator basketball managers. So there was a connection there that they, had some awareness of me and our team, but, I was able to show some of that athleticism through those games and at least make a connection there. And then, we were all huge Gator fans. David Lee, Matt Walsh, Anthony Roberson, those were the big guys on campus. And we were at every single basketball game in the Rowdy Reptiles section, front row, screaming for the games. And at the time, Lee Humphrey was a freshman sharpshooter on the team. Mm-hmm. And we'd run into him in the dining hall, quite often. And we're not shy. So we start talking to Lee Humphrey and ended up getting him out to the rec center. He'd show up to the rec and get shots up with us. And, that was another pretty quick connection that I made to the team that ended up, helping things come together a little bit. But that was really just the beginning of making a connection and getting a chance to get in front of the team and try to make it as a walk-on. But that freshman year was just full of freshman things. It was a blast.
Let's take a step back there too. Like, I obviously want to get into kind of how you made the team, but just there's so many things that stick out to me from just your youth sports career too, right? I think there's a lot of athletes today that, like yourself, that are extremely successful and are forced at a young age. I mean, you have, 3 kids yourself that I'm sure maybe will go through this at some point of, when is the right time to dedicate to one sport, right? Like the fact that you kind of felt like, hey, I kind of got to make this decision of like, is it going to be baseball? Is it going to be basketball? Like, what was what was that like for you? Like, what made you say, okay, it should be basketball, knowing that you maybe could have had a successful career in both of them?
Yeah, I think what led to that decision at the time, a big part of it was just the amount of time that it took for each sport to really be committed to. The time that went into baseball was 2 or 3 times that of basketball, because, these double headers, these games, you're getting there, 2 hours early to prep the field, staying an hour and a half after to take care of the field. It was, if you got a double header, that's an all day event.
Yeah.
So that was a factor, but I also just enjoyed playing basketball more than baseball. I may have been a better baseball player, but just really loved basketball more than baseball at the time. But I'm glad you brought that up, actually. That whole concept of when do you start dedicating to a sport is wildly different today than what I feel like it was when we were growing up. I've got 3 daughters now, almost 10. One just turned 8, and then a 1.5-year-old. So our older 2 have been playing sports, for 4 or 5 years already. And it's wild because even now we're seeing, 7, 8-year-old girls who are already dedicated to soccer. They're playing year round. They've got, coach on the side, and it's so competitive. And there's so many great players locally that they feel like they're forced to go specialize now at the age of 6 or 7. And to me, it's just wild because the way I say it is, you're not going to make the difference in making a, high school or college team right now, but you can break it, right? You can burn these kids out by the time they're 10, 11 years old, and, they're done with a sport and they have no interest in it because they've just been roasted for 6 years. So I'm still a big advocate of playing as many sports as you can. Our daughters are playing volleyball, basketball, soccer. I'm sure I'm missing a couple in there too, just trying to expose them to as much as we can. And now's not the time for us, at least, to be making that decision. And it'll come one day, but I want them to be as well-rounded as possible. And so many of those skills cross sports. And I always felt the same with soccer and baseball and the way that they, translated to basketball. And if anything, just the work ethic and understanding how to be a teammate is so important. And you can get that in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I do not have kids myself, but I think about that often. And, not that my athletic career was even close to yours, because it just wasn't. But just, I played soccer my whole life. Right. And then end up, running cross country and track in college and in high school. And it takes me to a scholarship and going to a university I maybe wouldn't have had the chance to go to. And it's, that's very different. Cross country and track is a very different sport because you kind of running's part of every sport that you're in. So it's a bit of an easier transition versus basketball and baseball, right? Look at, Michael freaking Jordan, right? The greatest basketball player of all time. Hey, he did okay in baseball, but he wasn't really anything to write home about, right? And that's one of the greatest athletes of all time in basketball. It just shows that versatility is, and you can't tell me, especially for you, G, look at just your family too, right? Like your family was bred in, being focused on different sports and different things. You mentioned your dad, a letter winner in baseball at Michigan State. Your mom's a 5-time national champion in racquetball, right? Then your brother is a fellow D1 basketball player that had an extremely successful career at Clemson and UCF in Florida. That matters. That's versatility. And I guarantee you that you probably took some of your baseball traits, I would imagine, that you developed, whether that was the work ethic, maybe some of the physical traits, and that probably helped you in your basketball career and even maybe making the team at Florida, the ability to balance those double headers like you had to and that type of stuff while balancing kind of 2 sports. So I'm assuming that's, do you ever look back and regret that decision, to give up baseball?
No, I mean, it was interesting too, because I was playing varsity baseball as a freshman and sophomore, and looking up to the guys, the older guys were just, I was so impressed with their skills, and I really enjoyed playing baseball. But then basketball, just the situation that we had there, I was playing JV my freshman and sophomore year, and it was an odd situation because our JV team went 18-0 my sophomore year, actually beat the varsity team when we scrimmaged, and that shouldn't ever be the case, but then just really played the varsity for 2 years, junior, senior year, and I don't know, just no matter how that happens, and I think even in my daughters already, I can see them sometimes get frustrated in the situation that they're in with the team, And sometimes they're not on the greatest teams, or their coach isn't somebody that is really dedicated to the team or the sport, and it's a volunteer situation. And you can see how that affects them already. And I was actually just tonight having that conversation with my daughter that you're going to be on teams like that. And that's part of team sports, right? There's great teams, there's below average teams, there's everything in between. But every single time that you're on the field or the court is an opportunity for you to become the best player that you can be. And don't waste that time. Don't waste that opportunity to make yourself better than you are today, because there'll be a time in the near future or further out where the time that you put in today or don't matters then. And you're going to be on these teams that need you to be the best that you can be. And if you just waste these moments now, you're robbing yourself and your future. So I try to really bake into them that regardless of what's going on around you, you be the best that you can be. And that's every day is that opportunity.
Man, that's powerful, G. Gosh, that's your story embodied in a 2-minute overview right there. Like the fact that you're passing that on to your daughters now, and I think it's just incredible. And obviously your wife was a incredible athlete as well, so I'm sure you both can share different perspectives. Yeah. But I admire to your, you were faced with a tough decision. I think a lot of athletes are faced with this too, like coming out of high school. Do I continue my athletic career knowing I'm probably not going to go pro, always remember that NCAA commercial of like 99% of college athletes will go pro in something other than sports, that commercial has always stuck with me. Like when you made that choice, obviously, to say, okay, do I want to continue this craft that I have worked on for the last 17 years of my life, or however old you are when you graduate high school, and say, okay, I'm going to give that up in quotes, right? I'm going to play rec or whatever, and I'm just going to go to college. Like, what was that decision process like for you? Was that hard, or did you kind of know, hey, listen, the rubber meets the road here. Like, I know this is probably not going to be a long-term, opportunity for me. I want to make sure I get ready for my life after sports, not knowing obviously the conclusion where it ended now, but just at that moment in time when you made that decision.
I think there are a couple of factors there. I had a pretty good feel for what I wanted to do, study in college and do afterwards. My dad has been a custom home builder. He's been in construction my entire life. So I grew up around that. And, there's family videos from when I was 6 years old. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a, construction manager. I want to be a project manager. So Florida has one of the best construction management schools in the country. So that was, there, and a path that I knew I wanted to pursue. And then just, again, being a lifelong Gator fan and wanting to have that big college experience, whether I was an athlete, playing for the university, or just, a student attending all the games and whatnot, that's the experience that I was looking for. So, coming out of that program that I mentioned earlier, ended up with a full academic scholarship to Florida. So,
wow.
That was a
powerhouse, G. You're a powerhouse. You're a powerhouse, man.
So put in a lot of time and effort to get into the position to be able to do that. So I wanted to take advantage of that. But even in that decision, and there not being a walk-on spot on the team that first year, I was aware of that situation, didn't make me relax, or didn't allow me to relax in continuing to work on my game and work on my strength and work on my skills. And, the intramurals were a great way to continue to develop that, and just literally battling with my roommates who were great basketball players themselves every single day was probably the best thing I could have done that year. Right. So, eventually that opportunity came, and, we can get into that in a bit, but when it came, I was ready. And, I credit my roommates a lot, for that freshman year and taking me from a high school player to somebody that was actually ready to go play in college.
Yeah. That's, as long as I've known you too, I didn't really know that. Like, is that, knowing you went to school, hey, I'm not necessarily going to play basketball. You said you were aware that there wasn't a walk-on spot. Did you think, hey, I think I'm good enough to be a walk-on this team? Or was it kind of like, hey, if the opportunity presents itself, maybe I'll try to make a go of it? Or was it just total like happy circumstance that you ended up kind of?
I think it was always in the back of my mind, as obviously that is, the highlight, the goal, the situation I would want to be in, but didn't know if there was a path to get there. But there was a very specific night that I remember, and your sister Laura was actually in town in Florida, and AJ and Laura and I were up late, hanging out one night, and then my mom actually came to tell us to quiet down and go to bed. But had in that moment, for whatever reason, that was a trigger. And I remember sitting down with my mom at like 1:00 in the morning and talking to her for 45 minutes about how I am going to make this team. Like, I see myself on that team, and I'm going to do everything I need to do to go put myself in that position. And when I see me, like, they're not going to pass up on me. So,
wow.
you know, some other time you can ask my mom about that conversation, but that was a specific moment where I said, this is going to happen. And then somehow figured out how to go make it happen from there.
That's the power of thought and vision and intention. I think a lot of the best athletes in the world talk about, right? I think you hear LeBron James talk about it a lot, right? He's going to work harder. He's going to eat better. He's going to, train more intently, right? He's going to have a mindset of like, you will not beat me, and I will not be beaten. And I will, even Dan Campbell, in Detroit for the Lions, right? He's like, you take my kneecap, I'm going to take the other one on the way down. Like, as much as that's a joke, like that grit is just like, that just screams out with you when you say that story of like, you were not going to be denied no matter what it took to get there, which I think is incredible. That's not a lot of people have that capability. So, okay. So you decide, hey, I'm not going to go play basketball. I'm going to Florida on a full academic scholarship, by the way. So kudos to you on that. So, you had a really strong high school basketball career. You were first team all Pinellas County in Florida for 2 years. You had game records for steals, offensive rebounds, season records for field goals made and attempted, blocks, dunks, points per game, and field goal percentage, just to be very clear, which your lovely brother came and broke most of those after the fact. Shout out,
That's
AJ.
Where I was going.
Yeah. Okay. So you're there. I'm not playing basketball. You kind of led into a little bit of the story earlier before I kind of took you back a sec just to talk kind of about how you got there. So I was reading your bio on the Florida Gators website, and I love the line here that I think it literally says he spent his freshman year at UF as a member of the Rowdy Reptiles.
Yeah.
And then it says you placed fourth that same year in the U.S. Open National Racquetball Championships in men beat doubles through Florida. So you were like not on the team at this point. Like, take us through, like, how did this happen? So you gave a little bit of a preview. You were playing intramurals, but like, how does this even become an idea? Like, does someone come call you? Do they say, hey, come to practice? Like, give people a sense of what that recruitment process was like as a walk-on.
It was unique, and it was a favorable situation, I'll say, because you've got to know some people to even get your foot in the door in the first place, right? And fortunately, my brother was an even better basketball player than I was, and at the time he was playing on AAU team, Florida's Team Nike, so a pretty high-profile team in Florida. I was playing with Austin Rivers and some other guys, and his coaches at the time had a connection to one of the assistant coaches at Florida, Donnie Jones. So, over the summers and things like that, I would be around their team and be on the floor with them. And, they could see the athleticism. I usually had the, highest vert in the gym and could dunk over anybody. But those are things that people notice, right? So, sharing that desire with them, they shared with me that there was a walk-on spot opening because they had that connection to Donnie and knew that something was coming available. So that was actually my in to try to make a connection to the Gator team. And my dad had spent a lot of time just putting together kind of the home version of a highlight tape by taking all the high school games and, trying to pick out the things that would get some attention and put that together. Got that to AJ's coaches, and they got it to the coaching staff at Florida. So that it was a series of connections that, people around me, my brother, my family, and others really all had a hand in connecting. And then once that tape got in front of them, I guess they saw that I had enough athleticism and whatnot to at least take a look. And then from there, it was really a unique situation in the sense that they invited me to a summer camp, not for me, but for, kids ages 6 to 12 or something like that, where it was a 4-day camp. And I was coaching in this camp now with all of the other, volunteers and Gator players and coaching these young kids from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Right. So now I considered it more of like a character tryout where they're not seeing me on the court. They're not seeing my skills. They're seeing how I interact with kids. They're seeing how I interact with the adults, the staff, the volunteers, and and all the other people that are there to pour into these kids. And I think that was the first look, to see, is this guy someone who has the character that we're looking for, someone that can fit in with these guys. And then where the opportunity on the court came was at the end of that camp every day, the Gator team at the time would come scrimmage, and all the kids from the camp would sit around the court and watch them play. And that was kind of like the highlight for the day for the kids. But for me, it was my opportunity to get on the floor with the full Gator team and just me to say, okay, can I compete with these guys? Can I hang? Can I fit in? Can I be, part of the system kind of deal? And it wasn't me there trying to differentiate myself from 50 other people trying to make the team, which is what a typical tryout looks like. If they hold an open tryout for a walk-on spot, they'll trim it down a little bit, but you're there with a sea of people trying to stand out somehow. And, that is not a favorable situation for anybody. But to be in the situation I was in, I knew that moment was coming. I was more prepared for that than I had ever been for a game or a practice or anything. And I showed up and I played the best I've ever played. I was ready for that moment. I was flying, throwing down dunks that they were pretty impressed with before we started running, and, knocking down shots and ripping rebounds above the rim. And I think the athleticism showed pretty quickly. So wow. I was on fire. I was able to hang, and pretty quickly it just transitioned to more and more things after that. But that's really the opportunity that opened it up for me.
Wow. I was not aware of just the background story that, went into, it's kind of an all out press, right? For lack of a better term, to kind of give you that moment of opportunity. But just because you got there doesn't necessarily mean that it was going to be a success, right? It's like getting to the starting line, right? You can do all the hard work, but at the end of the day, it's all what you do when the race starts. And for
absolutely
all intents and purposes, your race was starting that day. But what was that like? Like give people a preview. So, okay, hey, Garrett's staying after. We're like, are they running scrimmaging? Are they doing drills? Like what?
No, it was,
Like what type of stuff were you doing?
Full court, 5-on-5, and let's go. And I mentioned earlier that, I'd made some connection with Lee Humphrey. So that was kind of a comforting, thing to have there already, a familiar face, somebody had already spent time around, and he knew what I could do, from a dunking perspective. And, that's something that gets some respect pretty quick. So, before we start running, we're getting loose. Guys are, kind of getting some shots up and getting loose. And he's like, show him what you can do. And so now you get everybody's attention. They're like, all right, who's this guy? What's he going to do? And, come up pretty nonchalantly and end up throwing down like a 2-hand 360 pulled behind my back. And they were like, oh, okay. What else you got? So, throwing down some dunks, pulling it down between my legs and reversing it. And pretty quickly you can get some respect when you can do things like that. So
hell yeah.
They appreciate seeing that. And then, gosh, just running the floor. It was a different situation too, because you're not out there running plays. It's open gym, and you got to figure out a way to fit in and find your spots pretty quick. And I was able to just kind of find my openings around the mid range and knock down those shots. I was comfortable in that range and just let the athleticism show. So it came together.
That's so cool. Just because, you probably imagine some guy gets out there like Johnny Tryhard, right? And is like, I'm going to try to be, Kobe Bryant out here and doing everything, where I'm sure you probably realize at that point, like, I do have limitations. I know what I'm strong at. I know where maybe I'm, deficient, or I know I'm really going to stand out. I'm not going to be maybe, a guard bringing the ball up necessarily, right? Like that's probably not where you were thriving at that moment. Were the guys receptive? Like, what was that like? I mean, outside of Lee, were they like, who the hell is this guy? Like, we're going to show you what's up, or were they pretty cool of like, hey man, like welcome, like hope everything goes well, or what was that like?
I don't really feel like it was either. They weren't necessarily welcoming, because they don't know who I am. Right. I'm not on the team. Right. And at the same time, they weren't, jerks about it. They weren't like going hard, like going at me or pushing, beyond what they should. So it was pretty natural, I'd say. But I think I also had the awareness that they're not looking for a leading scorer on the team. Like, I don't need to be the guy that shows up and all of a sudden is like the new offensive weapon. Yeah. And I felt like I at least understood that I just need to show that I can fit in and, help in some way improve these guys. And I think I keep going back to the athleticism, because that was really an asset that seemed to shine through. And to be able to hang with those guys who are now, many of them NBA players, that's at least one of the things that they're looking for in a walk-on, is somebody that can push our other guys. We're going to be battling in practice every day. Is this somebody physically that can stand up, to the toll that a college D1 team is? And, do they have, there's a sense of needing to be humble in that situation too. Like, do they understand that it's a unique position to be in, and you got to be able to manage that correctly, I think. But, at least, I don't know, I thought a lot about it and tried to find my way to fit in there, and it seemed to work out.
Yeah, that's, I'm reminded of, one of the most famous underdog stories of all time. People are probably sick of hearing, but you look at a story like Rudy, right? And I remember that movie for as fake or as not from the truth that was, but there's that line, right, where I think one of the assistant coaches says, like, on the first day of practice, he's like, any thought you have of running out of that tunnel with that jersey on, get rid of that thought now. We're going to beat you. We're going to bruise you. Like, just take out the thought of Garrett Tyler making a fadeaway 3 to win the Natty. Like, that's not what you're here for. And like, knowing that, of course, anything is possible. Yes. But knowing in all reality, you're trying out to be somebody that's going to be, 14th, 15th guy on the bench. And you're going to be busting your chops just as much as Lee Humphrey or Torian Green or Corey Brewer or, just all of those guys. But you may not get the fanfare for that. You're not going to get some massive introduction and all that. And I know we'll touch on some of your cool dunking stuff of how you help bring the team out later. But I'm amazed. And I think that just shows that level of dedication. The fact that you went into that knowing that was the situation, I think probably is why you were able to fit in that day, because they knew, hey, this guy's not trying to show us up. He's trying to challenge us to be the best that we can be. And I think I give some credits to those guys too, because like that's a unique teammate to be able to kind of welcome somebody in and say, like, like I said, you're not a Johnny Tryhard. You're trying to make us better because the other team's going to be coming at you with their best. So I, Garrett, need to make sure I'm bringing my best so you're ready. And that's just a really cool trait. And I think speaks volumes to your ability to go in there and doing that, knowing that was kind of going to be your role if you made the team. Obviously. Exactly.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways that became my role, but, in different ways than just on the court, in the weight room, there were a lot of days where, I was trying to push myself, and I know a lot of those guys, especially the post players, were, stronger than me, but I was trying to push myself to a point that would get them to do something a little extra. And then, there's also a fine line in practice of going too hard as a walk-on versus, bringing the right level of intensity. So I'm not out there trying to get anybody injured, of course, but absolutely trying to push them in a way that puts them in a better position to win on, Saturdays and game days.
Yeah, that's just what a cool way to start out. So Billy Donovan's obviously the coach here. So, okay. So you go through this tryout, then I want to jump into kind of your first year. Okay. So like, how long did this go on for? Was this like a 5-week thing? Like 2 months? Like, when did you know, like, hey dude, like you made it, like, you're good. Like, welcome to Florida Gator basketball. And you can take a step back and say, okay, I made it. But did that moment ever happen, or like, what was
Not really
enrollment process like?
Yeah. So, we get out of that camp, and I knew that I had done everything that I could do there. And within a couple of weeks, I was getting some follow-ups from Donnie Jones, and it really just started out as saying, hey, we've got another open gym on, Saturday, come in and play with the guys. We play at 3:00, and, came to the practice facility, and at that time they knew who I was able to come in and play with the guys pretty quickly. And so it was like one thing there. And then, hey, we got open gym again on Tuesday. And then it was, hey, we're going to do some conditioning on Wednesday. And then it was, hey, we're lifting weights on Thursday. And then it was, hey, we need you to go, get all your physical stuff done and this and that. And the whole way through, I'm like, there's never been a conversation about, did I make it? Am I on the team? I'm having this conversation with my parents like every day, telling them what I did today. And they're like, well, are you on the team, or like, what's happening? How's this? I'm like, I think so, but nobody's like said that yet. And, my mom pointed this out to me again. She's like, well, there was that day at practice where you walked in and for whatever the event was, and somebody was putting your name up on the locker. And I was like, so did I make the team? And she's like, they don't put your name on the locker if you're not on the team. So that was kind of I guess, the thing that defined it. But
Wow.
they never really said, hey, good job, we want you to be on the team. It was just, here's the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And then that just never stopped.
Wow. I mean, that probably, again, speaks probably to your mindset going in, which is probably why they wanted you on the team too. You're not saying, hey, did I make it? Asking Donnie or, trying to get in front of Billy and be like, hey, my name is Garrett. I'm this incredible player. I can add a lot to the team. Like, you were just showing it on the court, which I'm sure made them realize, okay, we got a humbled but yet motivating, person that we think could be positive around us. I think a lot of people, probably would be enamored with the, just the level of professionalism around them and maybe a little bit too bright lights. I always remember this from growing up, coming out of college. I had an opportunity to work for the Cleveland Cavaliers. They wanted me to be like a season ticket salesperson or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I remember going through the interview process, and I ended up getting offered the job. I didn't end up taking it, but I remember the head of ticket sales looked at me and he said, there's a difference between people that are good at this job and those that aren't. And he said, if you're a fan and you try to do this job, you will never be successful because you just won't be able to get past the fact that LeBron James may walk by or the coach is going to walk by. And like, you have to be able to just look at those people as normal, normal people. You have to be able to do your job and not get, starstruck by that. I'm sure they felt the same way about you, for a college kid that grew up in Florida, loved the Gators, to be in the practice facility with future NBA stars and not be overwhelmed by the situation. That's probably hard to find for a walk-on, I would imagine.
Yeah. I remember those first days clearly. And I remember being so exhausted at the end of practice. And, we'd always sit in a big circle and stretch out and cool down at the end of practice. And I'd be completely soaking wet, so like sore, tired, exhausted, but loving every minute of it. And just thinking specifically that I've got to appreciate these moments because, these are special moments. Don't know how long they're going to last, but don't take it for granted and just try to soak it all up. So that was really my mindset for the 3 years that I got to play.
That's so cool. So, okay. All right. So just chronologically, okay. You officially made the team, even though no one told you. But you're on the team now. So this is obviously your freshman year, right? So 0405, for those keeping score out there of ages here, kind of where G and I sit, but, obviously, a lot of your success came in the sophomore and junior year from a team perspective with the Natties. But take us through that first year. I see your first point was on a free throw attempt against Stetson. Do you remember this? I'm not sure. Yeah, was that awesome to get in the score sheet, or can you take us through the foul? Was it a hard foul? Like, what was it a BS call? Like, just like do you remember?
Oh, man. I honestly don't remember exactly how it came down, but I do remember the first times that I was out on the floor for a game and, you're in the O'Connell Center, the O-Dome, and there's 12,000 people there. And that was the first time that I had ever played in front of a crowd like that. And, playing in a stadium like that versus some of the high school gyms, it definitely affects your depth perception and just, your feel on the court. So that does take some adjusting. And those guys make those adjustments so quickly and they play so smooth in those situations, but gave you a different appreciation being out there, even in the last, few minutes of the game. But what I always really enjoyed is that the crowd always got so excited when the walk-ons came in the game. And, the team also, anytime we scored, that everybody would be so fired up. So, a couple of us, got a fair amount of time and got plenty of buckets. So there were lots of things to get excited about, but just tried to soak it up and tried to make the most of it when I was out there.
That's so awesome. I also see you got to participate in the dunk contest at Midnight Madness. Is this like a start of the season? I'm assuming, right? All the college basketball teams do this, right? Like just all the fans get together and they have some major thing. I mean, it sounds like dunking was a key attribute that you were able to bring. What the hell was that like? I'm sure it was I don't know how many people they can fit in the stadium. Was it 20,000? I have no idea how many you could fit in that stadium, but was it nuts? Yeah. Like just students everywhere and you're dunking?
It's a fun night for sure. That's the first night that you're legally allowed to work together as a team to start the season. So that's the big kickoff and, just introducing the whole team to the fans and the whole place is packed, 12,000 people there in that arena. And The dunk contest was a big part of that. So it was a very defining moment, I'd say. There's a big lead up through the camps and all the things that we just talked about to get to that point. And that was kind of the first time that anybody knew who I was, right? Nobody knows who Garrett Tyler is before that moment, but get a chance to come out there and be part of the dunk contest. And there's a really cool article that my parents have, back home, where it's telling this story of me making it to the team. And it has a snapshot of me just mid dunk, with the ball down between my legs, about to reverse dunk it. And it's kind of just like that defining moment to say, okay, here we go. But yeah, just being in front of that crowd was always so energizing and gave you a couple extra inches. But yeah, the dunking, the athleticism, I keep saying that, but had the highest vert on the team, right? So I could go do some things that a lot of people couldn't do, but just enjoyed every minute of it.
What a cool thing. You go from watching the, being on the sidelines your freshman year to now your sophomore year, freaking in the dunk contest at the same thing you probably attended your freshman year, which is just want to talk about irony in that situation. So yeah, just awesome. So yeah, your freshman year, 04-05, you guys went 24-8, got eliminated in the second round against Villanova. Heading into your sophomore year, I mean, this was obviously the start of something incredible, right? You guys finished 33-6 that year. We'll kind of get through the title run and all that, but like that, I mean, that team was just absolutely like stacked. Just kind of take me through going into 05-06. So your sophomore year, like, did you guys know, hey, we got a squad that can win the Natty, or was it just kind of the season progressed and things developed? Like, what was that like for you?
It's different. I do want to spend a minute just talking about that 04-05 group, because those guys, David Lee, Matt Walsh, Anthony Roberson, they were all seniors. They were big time names, like all conference players, known throughout the collegiate, ranks. And these guys were great players and, were never really able to crack through in the tournament, but they're the ones that really told or taught our guys, all the guys that were freshmen, Al Horford, Corey Brewer, Joakim Noah, Torian Green, all those guys, freshmen, trying to get playing time, but working under those guys. Those are the ones that taught them, how to work and how to approach this thing. And they were great mentors. We just weren't able to have the tournament success that we were looking for. But, I very specifically remember the first conversation that Billy had with us our sophomore year, going into the 06 year, where all those guys I just mentioned were sophomore. Billy comes into the meeting room, and this is our first, kickoff, our first practice, his first time talking to us as a group heading into the season. And he comes in fired up. Like, he's a loud talker, but he was angry. And we're like, okay, we're just getting started. What's he so angry about? He's like, I am, lots of expletives that I won't repeat. He's like, I am sick and tired of everybody telling me this is going to be a rebuilding year, that we don't have any, returning starters, that we don't have talent, that we don't have depth. He's like, I am sick and tired of it. He's like, I know what's in this room. He's like, this group is winning championships this year. And we all kind of looked at him like, okay, yeah, let's go do that. And then literally every moment after that, like, he set that high bar from day one. Everything we did, from, weightlifting, from the individuals, conditioning, practice, going to class, getting our rehab in, all those things were done through a championship mindset. And he set that bar, held us accountable. And there was, that's when that idea was planted. And then we go and rip off the first 16 game of the season, go 16-0 to start the season. And we were unranked. So to answer your question about, did we know we were stacked? I mean, we knew we had guys that could play, and guys that were hungry, guys that didn't get the playing time that they necessarily wanted their freshman year. And this is their opportunity now. These guys have been training their butt off all summer. Joakim Noah specifically, that dude, he had a tough freshman year. He had mono. He was sick a lot. He did not get the playing time, playing under David Lee. Al was getting some more playing time. He was bummed. Like, he did not have that freshman year that he wanted. I've never in my life seen somebody pour into themselves and their training and just an obsession of being the best version of themselves that they can be over that off season. This dude's out there running sprints around the track at midnight in the rain by himself, because he does not want to waste a minute improving from where he was to this next season. And he came in and he was on another level. and so many ways a leader on that team to say, this is how hard we're going to work this year. And I'm not going to let anybody, give anything less than that. So he set the tone in a huge way about how we were going to go work as a team that year. And like I said, it just, we were unranked to start the year. Nobody was looking at us. Nobody was giving us any attention. We beat Wake Forest and Syracuse at Madison Square Garden early in the year, and that got a little bit of attention. And then when we went 16-0, people were paying attention, right? Then we were on the map from there, and really just took advantage of every game, every moment, and had a chip on our shoulder that year for sure.
Yeah. And talking, I got to mention too, I should have from the start, like the amount of guys that you played with that went on to have successful professional, and not just in the NBA, but obviously internationally. I mean, you said, David Lee graduated, right? 13-year NBA vet, NBA champion with the Warriors, right? Anthony Roberson also played in the NBA. Matt Walsh played in the NBA. Granted, some smaller stops for the other two guys, but that right there, you essentially lost 3 NBA players only to replace them with, had we known at the time, right? Corey Brewer, 13 seasons, NBA champion with Dallas, right? Al Horford still playing. Shout out to Al here.
That's
18
wild.
years, NBA champion with the Celtics. Obviously, Joakim Noah, played 13 seasons. I mean, and I could go through all these guys. Adrian Moss, Lee Humphrey played in European. He would play, Chris Richard, Walter Hodge, Maurice Spates. All of these guys had extremely successful professional careers. I would argue for you to find a team in the last 20 years that has had a roster of talent like that. Even Calipari in his peak with some of those Kentucky teams, they had 4 or 5 guys maybe. I mean, you're talking 10 to 12 guys that ended up playing some type of professional ball, which is just, what was it like to be around all of those guys too? Like looking back, Garrett, last year watching Al Horford win the title. That's like a teammate of yours. That's not just like a random guy on the TV. What was that? I guess, what is that like now? Realizing that.
I know, it's so funny because those moments, those memories, they all feel like yesterday. They're so vivid, so crisp. And I can remember just all of those years like they happened last week. And then I stand up and my knees remind me I'm 20 years past that. And that was actually a long time ago. But to see Al still playing is unreal. He looks the same as he did in college. Yeah. But really happy to see him get that title last year and see what else they can do this year. But going against those guys every day in practice was just the best. I tried to bring everything I had. They're obviously going to raise the level of play around them. And we just had a group that loved to compete, and, playing against each other was the best thing for each other. We pushed so hard. There were fist fights in practice because guys were going so hard and care so much about the game. And, all that's coming from a place of competitive nature and wanting to, be the best team out there. And at the same time, we've got each other's back all day, every day. So, those are some things that people outside the team probably don't see or hear about, but there was such passion with that team. It was contagious.
Wow. Yeah. And I think your comment too on Noah, cause he was, obviously there's a ton of great guys on those teams, but he was such a polarizing figure in the NBA when he came out, right? Kind of had I don't want to say a mixed, reputation, right? I think maybe people didn't fully understand, hearing what you just said about him, sprinting at night at midnight in the rain, just speaks volumes. The way you even talking about him, you can see it in the way you speak about him, just his level of intensity. When you look back at that team from an outsider perspective, he just seemed like the fuel that helped really kind of get everybody going. Just that energy. Now, I remember right, his dad, they were always showing his dad, if I remember right too, on the screen. I'm trying to think back too of this time, but can you talk a little bit about, Noah and just kind of exactly what you talked about? Do you agree with that sentiment that he always just maybe had, I don't want to say an unfair reputation. It just felt like people didn't always fully understand the guy. And I think that's so horrible when you think about the commentary you just gave, you know what I mean? About what a tough, hard-nosed guy he was that just wanted to be best of the best.
Yeah. He's one of my favorite people I've ever met, period. People either love him or they hate him, though. There's not a whole lot in between. Yeah. And the ones that hate him, to your point, I feel like just don't know him. He was, coming in as a freshman, 18 years old, one of the most cultured, well-rounded, experienced humans I've ever met in my life. You know, he speaks 3 languages fluently. He's lived for significant parts of his life in Sweden, in Paris, in Cameroon, in New York City. This guy has experiences that most adults never have. So, you know, I think about all these locker room conversations that we're having before practice or traveling or, you know, games and things like that. He's bringing such a unique, like worldly, cultured perspective to these conversations that I think really opened a lot of guys' minds up, and, you know, in so many different ways brought us together because, you know, he's got the ability to go have a conversation or have a point of view on something based from experience that nobody else on this team has. And I think we had a lot of mature guys on the team and really got into some pretty deep conversations that, you know, I appreciated so much. And, you know, he is a driver in so many of those things. But, you know, talk about energy, a guy on a team that you want on your team. He's that guy. Like, he's driving everything we have from a hype perspective and intensity perspective, and just laying the effort out on the line. And I think a lot of people got turned off by what they saw because he was, you know, what they thought was flashy and like in the camera and wanted the attention. That's just his pure passion for the game coming out. And that's the only way he knows how to play. But when people only see that on the TV, when they're watching games, and they think that's what that is, what they don't see is that's him in the weight room. That's him in conditioning. That's him every single day in practice. And that's just Joe. Like, that's who he is. And that's the only way he knows how to live his life, not even play basketball, but whatever he does, he's all in. And that is something that we latched on to. And, you know, that team really needed, and in a lot of different times, he was that driver. So appreciated him for that. And I think he knew that was his role too, because, you know, he just had a great ability to tap into that endless energy and effort that, you know, when the rest of us were done and ready for practice to be over, he was the one that was still pushing, and he was going hard, and he was bringing us along with him. So, you know, hugely valuable to the team.
Yeah, that's, you know, I think every championship team probably needs that guy, right? Needs that player that yep. kind of fuels everybody, and everyone looks to kind of almost sometimes be the, you know, the one that's going to get a lot of the attention and spotlight, probably, so others maybe, you know, don't even have to have that. And who knows that, right? Maybe that was something he said, hey, I'm going to be the, you know, the one that's going to take some of this, whether it's pressure off the team, whether intentionally or unintentionally, right? Knowing he was a polarizing guy. You wonder if that helps, you know, maybe it helped a guy like Al Horford, or, you know, because even like, I just look at his professional career, right? I don't want to say he's been a quiet guy, but he's always been kind of a grab your lunch pail, go to work type of player. That's who he's been his entire career. You don't see a lot of drama with him, doesn't really follow him around anywhere. That's why I think he's still playing as much as he is. Guys want to play with him. You wonder if, you know, Noah's ability to do that, you know, whether it was difficult for him, which I'm sure it was, actually helped the rest of the team feel like, okay, we can also be insulated and have our family, right? Where like, we don't care what anybody else thinks, but like, this is our Florida team. And like, I don't give a shit what anyone else thinks about, you know, whether it was you or Al or Corey or whatever it might be, right? Like, that almost galvanized you guys a little bit, given some of the skepticism I'm sure of, you know, everybody's always critical. That's, you know, welcome to media, right? That's what everybody is. But yeah, so yeah, I was just going to say too, so kind of chronologically too, kind of working through here. So your sophomore year, you obviously, you know, your starting lineup that year, Torian Green, Lee Humphrey, Corey Brewer, you know, Joakim Noah, and Al Horford. I mean, you guys like there's so many highlights I could cover around that year. I mean, I was looking it up and I didn't remember this, but in the Sweet 16, obviously you guys finished 33-6, had a hell of a year. Like you said, you were unranked coming in, end up going into the tourney just on an absolute hot streak. But in the Sweet 16, I see Corey Brewer made a twisting, falling down shot, what became a 3-point play with 27 seconds left to defeat Georgetown. Like, was that the moment in that tournament that you were like, okay, this is something special going on?
Well, yeah, that was the survive and advance moment for sure, because I remember that coming into that game, we knew they were a tough team, and it was a tie game late. And, you know, Corey had this kind of awkward twisting, falling down, got the shot up, went in kind of deal, and knocked down the free throw to give us that lead. But still, Georgetown had the ball. I think it was 10 seconds left or so, coming down with a 3 to win the game, had an opportunity to win the game still. And I just remember on my hands and knees on the other side of the court, like praying, please miss this shot and see it go off the back of the rim. And, we moved on, and it was just, that was such a fun year, because even backing up to the SEC tournament, we lost 3 out of 5 games to finish the SEC season and go into the SEC tournament. And in a lot of ways, I feel like that was a good wake-up call, because, we had a lot of success that season, but maybe felt like we had it figured out, and that reminded us that we didn't, and got us locked in going into the SEC tournament, figured out how to go win that tournament, and then gave us that momentum going in the NCAA. But once you're past the first round, that first game, every single game is a game that any team can win. If you're in that, round of 32, you belong there, and you've got a shot to go beat whoever you're playing. So that was the game that we didn't necessarily play our best. It was a low scoring game. I think it was in the 50s, if I remember, 50s or 60s. And, we just had to squeak that out and move on. And then from there, we were just on a tear.
Yeah. You guys beat Georgetown 57-53 off of that Corey Brewer 3-point play, which is just incredible to think back. And it's so funny you mention yourself on the end of the bench, because being an avid fan of yours that I am, you gave me a reason to care about college basketball when I was, at that age, which was my freshman, sophomore year in high school, I think at that point. But I just remember just seeing you on the end of the bench, whether it was big plays or some guy coming off, right? Like coming off after just playing, you were always first one up, timeouts, you were getting out there cheering the guys on. What was your role, I guess, in the tournament? We're obviously in the midst of March Madness right now. And we had my good friend Billy on last year. He was a manager for Michigan State basketball that I'm not sure if you heard that episode, but he probably gave a little bit different perspective because he was on the manager side, which I'm sure you have a ton of respect for those guys, but Absolutely. Really fascinating to hear his story about the prepping and the, you're in ballrooms drawing out, basketball on the basketball floor to make sure that you're, after they're done eating, you're in there working on, okay, are we going to switch? How are we going to defend this guy? Knowing you were on the, we'll call it, kind of the scout team, right? Obviously you're still on the team, but your job was to get these guys ready. Was your experience in the tournament different than kind of the starters? Did you have to put in extra time to learn the other plays of the other team, or what was a typical tournament run? You went through 2 of them, obviously very long, both, NCAA titles. Can you take us through kind of what that was like on a day-to-day, just kind of being in that moment, and you're traveling, you're flying all over the country? I mean, just what was that like?
Yeah, exactly. It all happens so quickly too. And you've got those 2 games in the weekend, and, the coaching staff does such a great job preparing scouting for those possible games that you're going to play. So they've got a full scouting report, and they're prepared to play either team that wins ahead of you. Right. So we've got to be ready either way. And myself and some of the other guys on the team have to be ready to go prepare our guys for that also. So we've got to go learn, those plays and be able to go run those plays against our guys so that they can start seeing the action, getting the reps, and we put our defensive scheme together off of that. So, it's a quick turnaround. It's a lot of information to take in a short amount of time and try to, put it to use. But, the way the coaching staff had done their scouting really set us up for success. I think one of those that showed very clearly was against Villanova in that same tournament. Just after we beat Georgetown, Villanova was the 1 seed, and we run into them in the Elite 8. And Anthony Grant was our associate head coach at that time, and really had just done a great job with that scouting report. They had really no set plays, but just a lot of concepts that they could run into and different options and different situations on the floor. And the way that he prepared our guys and the way we were able to get ready for that offense put us in that position to go win that game. And, that was a 10-point win or so, and really slingshotted us to the Final Four.
So you're what was a typical night like you in the tournament like? So, okay, so you just win, let's say you win that Sweet 16 game. All right. I mean, obviously I guess at that point, you got the Elite 8, I know there's some time difference in between, but like, what did that time actually look like? Like, were you getting like a playbook at the time of like, hey, go to your hotel room and learn this? Is it like on the fly? And is it like, hey, go bump up against Corey Brewer because you got to pretend that you're Aaron Aflalo, so when you go to the title game, like he's ready to go? Like, Garrett, you're Aaron or you're Cedric Bozeman. Like, who, like, are you going to sign a player or something? Or like, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, that tape on the ballroom floor example is exactly how that goes, right? So, we win that game, we come back, we get dinner, we get rehab. A lot of the guys are getting, massages and what they need to do to get ready physically. And, myself and some of the other guys are off in the other room now trying to learn that next offense and exactly that on the ballroom floor and putting in some hours to be ready there so that, in the walkthrough the next morning, we can be able to go run our guys through that and get them ready. So the short turnaround there between those two games in a weekend where you really only have that next day to prepare for the next team, as opposed to a full week to prepare for that first game. That's the challenging one, because it could be one of two teams. And oftentimes those are two very different teams. And then once you know the answer to that question, you've only got 24 hours essentially to go get ready for it.
Man, that's just, I'm always amazed at just the turnaround, the behind the scenes work, I should say, that has to happen just getting ready for some of these games. They don't show up and know, oh, they're running zone. Like, someone had to pull that tape. And I think think about the technology we have now. And, Billy even talked about it too, that back then they were, running, VHS tapes or DVDs, doing recordings of other games and everything versus, now I can go to YouTube and type in probably every Florida Gators offensive play for this year, and some numbnuts has probably pulled it together, and I can just rip that and understand the tendencies. You think about what the tech was; it was probably triple the work at the time to get some of that stuff together.
Yeah, but again, the assistant coaches were so prepared that we knew the other team's hand signals, we knew their calls, and what would really get in the team's head is when they're making their signals, running down the court, and our guys are already pointing and yelling, what's coming next. And then that's actually what's happening. That's when you really know you've put the work in, and our guys have a lot of confidence then in that situation, of course.
That's absolutely demoralizing if I was on the other team. Okay, so you guys ultimately make it to the finals going up against UCLA. I mentioned some of those guys, but Jordan Farmar, Aaron Aflalo, Cedric Bozeman, Luke Richard Mute, which I remember him. Yep. Ryan Hollins. I believe damn near all those guys played in the league. If I'm looking at this right, they at least had a run in it. I think most of them did.
They had some great players.
So what was that? I mean, obviously you guys end up, winning that game. No surprise there, because that's what I started off the pod with. We all know that you won back to back, but I mean, what was that first one like? Like, clock's ticking down, or like, to take us through the pregame speech? Like, obviously it's so interesting to me because you can't, like, you're not going to be on the floor. So like you're like a fan, right? Where you're like, I literally have no control of this outcome, but I am hinging my entire emotion off of it.
I mean,
what was it like? Yeah. So what was it like going into that final game? Obviously, ultimately winning the title. And I know I got so many questions for you jumping off the bench and all the pictures you were in, but take us through Billy's kind of preview heading into that game and just kind of what it was like to win a title.
His whole thing was live in the moment. This is such a rare opportunity for anybody to even get a chance to play in this game. Live in the moment, stay within ourselves, play for the guy next to you. And that was really the message. And I think a lot of times people get in that situation and they try to do too much. They try to be too perfect. They try to, do something a little bit outside of the range of what they typically do. And he always just, told us to take our good shots. Torian understands what his good shots are. Corey understands what a good shot for him is. And if you get those opportunities, take those shots. Just be you, do what's gotten us here this far. And again, just play for each other and we'll be just fine. But we had such an extreme confidence at that point. I don't think there was any shred of doubt by anybody on our team or our staff that we were going to go win that game. And it was just a matter of time. It was a matter of 40 minutes. We're going to wear them out. We're going to grind them down. And this is going to be ours. So that was really the beginning of it. And it was just such an exciting, such a fun year. Nobody expected it from the start of the year. We built that momentum. And the way we finished was just, we felt unbeatable. Joakim Noah went from barely playing his freshman year to being Final Four MVP and number 1 pick in the draft. If he had gone out that year, Corey and Al were both top 10 picks also. And that combination of guys that led to them coming back is such a unique part of that team. Also, there's a lot to talk about there, but I don't think you'll ever see that again, where you've got 3 top 10 players in the draft winning a championship and they all come back the next season. That never. I'd be willing to bet that never happens again.
I would agree with you. I think that's what makes that back-to-back so unique, is it wasn't just the back-to-back. It was the way that you guys did it. You didn't have some flurry of 5-star freshmen coming in that just reloaded at the top. You literally had all those guys came back, which, yeah, I definitely want to dive into that too. But just take me. Okay, so you guys win the title. Like, you're jumping on the floor. I also noticed too, whenever you guys won a game, you would always take your warm up off. So you just had like Tyler on the back. Was that like trying to get some Tyler love out there? Was that required? But gee, for somebody that was like 14th guy in the bench, man, every picture that exists from these titles, it's like Billy Donovan, Al Horford, and then there is Garrett Tyler right there. Was this intentional, or did this just happen to happen?
Yeah, so there's some great photos that came out of that, and that was not intentional, not trying to position myself strategically, but just wanting to be in the middle of it and just living in the moment. That's all that Billy said, is just live in the moment, right?
Okay.
So there was a lot of that, but gosh, it was, such, I don't know, just excitement, pure joy and excitement to know that, we made that run all the way through the year and came from nowhere to on top. And, we'll get into it also, but it was a very different vibe that year versus 2007.
Yeah. So like, what happens after you win the title, by the way? Are you just like going nuts? Like, did you guys like just like rage in the locker room or what? Like, what the hell were you just like, oh my God? Like, and also like, when did people start talking like, hey, are we coming back to rerun this? Like, was that mentioned that night, or were you guys just like, let's just enjoy this moment? Or like, did you know before everybody, oh yeah, they're all coming back to do this thing again?
Yeah. Well, to answer your first question, we partied for 2 weeks straight. And, every bar, every club in town wanted to have us there. So we took advantage of all that and just.
Yeah, you did. Yes, you did.
Yeah, definitely enjoyed all of that. So, let that 2 weeks pass, and then we kind of got back to basketball things.
Okay.
And it wasn't right away that they had made that decision. And, 3 of those guys were in a very different position than the 4th. We talk about Joakim Noah, his dad, Yannick Noah, French Open champion, big pop star, reggae star in Europe. Al Horford's dad played in the NBA. Torian Green's dad played in the NBA. These guys, they're set. They're in a comfortable position. Corey's family, in a very different position. His dad had just kind of come off of surgery, had part of his leg amputated, had some health concerns and things like that. And his family was the family that would really benefit greatly from that financial situation and that move to the NBA. And those guys, they came in together and they stuck together in that moment too. And they said, we're here for you, Corey, whatever decision you feel like you need to make, we 100% support you, and we're all going to make the same decision. Not just laying it on his shoulders necessarily, but saying we're all in this together. If we're staying, we're staying. If we're not, we're all going, because they all would have been draft picks. And, Corey's family was at the core of that decision also. And, his dad specifically knew that would be the temptation for Corey to go, to be able to, put your family in a position where they don't have to go, worry about finances and healthcare and all those things going forward. But his dad recognized that this is a moment, an opportunity that you will never get the rest of your life. And if these guys are all talking about staying and you get a chance to continue this journey with these guys, you cannot pass that up. You can't let that go. So his dad basically said, you've got to stay. This is something that you'll never get again. And you can't not pursue this. So really, to have those 3 guys that weren't forced into the situation, and then have the perspective from Corey's dad to bring that together. And then also for those guys to have the maturity to say, I went from barely playing last year to playing in the NBA next year. I'm not ready for that. Right. There's a lot of development, a lot of skill, work that needs to take place still. And to say that I'm not ready, also is very unique. You're not going to see 18, 19-year-olds making that decision often.
Especially now. You will,
for sure.
I mean, we can dive there's 1,000 ways we could go, but that would not happen today. I mean, I look at Michigan State, who's a great basketball team. Look at Jace Richardson. They're already thinking he might go out. It's like, what would that guy be as a junior? Imagine how good he could be. But you got to weigh the balance of there is true financial, like what if Corey would have blown his knee out that year and all of a sudden he's a second round pick. That's a real concern. I mean, like that could happen. And that's what makes this story so special is it's not just that you won it twice. It's that you did it now in an era where kids today look back and they could never even imagine that, right? Look at the NBA today. You have all these young guys that are jumping for the money, rightfully so. If it's family changing money, I can't sit here and tell them I wouldn't do it, right? If I got offered a job tomorrow for, $15 million a year for the next 4 years, I'm probably taking the job, right?
Yeah.
But that just shows, I love that, they kind of said, like, we're going to do this together, not putting the pressure on them, but almost like if you make the choice to go, we're going to go too, because we realize like we're either going to do this together or we're not going to do it. And we'll have this memory forever.
Yeah.
Did you ever like say anything to Corey? Like, did anyone ever like try to convince him, or was it really like, hey, you do what you got to do?
Yeah. I mean, we all understand, like, if it's a family thing, no one is going to second guess that.
Yeah.
So, we had his back either way, and we're obviously thrilled that they made the decision that they made. And we tried to lead everybody in the other direction and had a big pep rally and brought everybody together. And, Al, again, packed stadium, 12,000 people, and Al's on the microphone saying, we really appreciate our time at Florida, and, we've accomplished our goals, and, we just want to thank everybody for the support we've gotten. And they kind of look at each other and they're like, but we're coming back. Like, we're doing it again next year. We're coming back. And everybody goes crazy. And, from then on, it was a whole different challenge for Billy, that second year and for us as a team, because now all of a sudden you've got 5 starters returning from a championship team. The only expectation is that you win it again, and anything less than that is a fail. Right. So now that is a different weight, a different pressure that is imposed on a team. And Billy's task then that next year was to shield all of that from the team and let us go focus on what we need to go focus on.
Which is, I always say this, right? It's a common in every sport. We've talked about a lot on this podcast with the Lions, right? Going from the hunter to being the hunted is a completely different mindset, because then you start, are you playing to win or are you playing not to lose? And when you play not to lose, you generally lose. That's normally what you see happen, because you're not playing at your full go. Yeah. So everybody says they're coming back. Like, did your role change at all too, going in from sophomore to junior year? So now you've been on the team now, right? You're entering your 3rd year on the team that year. Like, were you taking on more of a leadership role, even though you got a team of freaking NBA players coming back? Like, how did your role evolve as the team, the expectations, et cetera, evolve, knowing that at this point you really become a veteran on the team? Just take us through that.
And in that case, we've got a few new freshmen coming in. So some guys that are coming in after a championship team, and, they've got to acclimate to the college expectations, and especially a team that just won it. There are a few guys on the team now, including myself and some of the other walk-ons that have that experience and have a responsibility to share that with them. But it was a very different vibe that year. You were talking to Cody a few weeks ago about the Tigers training camp, and it reminded me a lot of the way he was describing camp this year. Feels more business-like is the way that he described it. And it very much felt like a shift from us just playing free and loving the game and just playing for the joy of the game and proving people wrong, to now it being more business-like. And not that we lost any passion for the game or love of playing the game, but those expectations are impossible to shield entirely. And, you win a game by 15 and people are upset because you don't win by 30. And those are the things that, Billy really had to spend a lot of time on with us. And his phrase that year was just stay inside the rope. we've got to put a rope around our team. There's all the support we need within this rope. Nobody outside the rope has your best interest in mind. They're looking for your time. They're looking for your attention. They need or want something from you, and it's not in the best interest of this team. So we need to block that out and stick together and remember why we came back, right? We didn't come back just to, be able to stand up to people's expectations. We came back because these guys realized they weren't developed enough to be, joining the NBA. So there's a lot of personal work that we've got to do, skill work we've got to do. Then at the same time, we're trying to be champions. Of course, that is still the goal. And we want to be something, a team that people remember. And the first conversation he had with us that year, the previous year, it was, we've got the talent in this room to go win championships this year. That's what we're going to do. The second year, it was, I want this team to be known as the greatest team that has ever existed. And he's like, that might not mean we win a championship this year, but I want this to be known as the best team, collective team that has ever existed. And that was the mindset that year. So, that took any kind of selfishness or ego or any of that out of the equation. And we just continued to play for each other with that goal in mind, like be the best team that has ever existed. How about that for a goal?
Aim high, miss high, I guess, right? That's the idea there. Like I love the mentality, because that's also, it's a really interesting way to frame the realistic pressure that, you guys had, because it's almost, there's two ways probably to, and you've seen this probably more than anybody. There's two ways to approach when you're a favorite or you're, best of the best. Is, do you embrace the fact that you're a favorite and lean into it and embrace the criticism that's going to come with it? Or do you try to create this, Dan Campbell does this a lot for the Lions, always have this constant chip on your shoulder, right? You're always trying to create this, weekly adversity to say, okay, now we're the agitated ones, right? We're the ones that are being undermined. To your point, like, oh, some other team said, the Lions aren't real. They're fake. Like Jared Goff's horrible, whatever it is. It's those are two very different approaches. And you see coaches take different approaches to that mentality. I like the way Billy did it, because he acknowledged, like, we know what our goals are. Like, well, let's lean into that and let's strive to be better to achieve that, versus saying, we're not the best. Like, we just want to win. It's a fascinating thought process. And obviously it worked for you guys, but do you agree with that? Kind of two different approaches you can take. Obviously Billy took the right one, of course, because you guys won, but just kind of an interesting thing to think about. Yeah.
I think great coaches have an ability to understand the dynamics of each team and each season. And those are unique year to year. If you're looking at the Lions, they can't hang out on, the grit mentality for 4 or 5 years in a row. It doesn't work. It had its time and its place, and it was perfect when that was the thing.
Yes.
But this year, that's not the thing,
No.
So, I could see coaches getting stuck on whatever worked in the past and not understanding how that dynamic has changed and missing the mark with the team and missing an opportunity over the course of a year. But Billy, man, he was in it. I love his mentality, the way that he was able to, prepare us for the moments that we were going to face. And they were very different from the year before. And it's like he had lived it before we did. And he was able to go, prepare us for those moments. So it's just really awesome to see. And his leadership is something that, I soaked up and have carried with me into my career now in lots of different ways. And man, it's just a really, really special group to be around, and tried not to take it for granted and soak up as much of it as we could.
That's what a fascinating just evolution of a team too, in a matter of two seasons. You guys see you go from we're not even ranked to Billy saying we want to come back and be the greatest basketball team that ever played. Obviously that second year you end up winning the title. I'm sorry, your third year, but second year back to back, you end up beating Ohio State in the finals there, who had Mr. Greg Oden there, right? Number one pick. Yeah. What was the second title like? Any more sweet than the first one? Was it a sense of relief? You hear about people that win titles talk a lot about a sense of relief when they win it versus a sense of excitement. What was the vibe for you guys, knowing, for especially those guys that came back?
Yeah.
Like we made the right choice.
Yeah. Now, it was a very different tournament run. And, looking back at 2006, we had that tight game against Georgetown, but every other game was double digit, 12, 15 plus point games. We ran away with it. You would expect that it was more of that in 2007, but it really wasn't. Once we got past, I think it was Jackson State, maybe in the first game, beat them by 40 something. Every other game was a single digit game. We had Butler and Purdue and Oregon. All those were 2-3 point games with 3 minutes left. And I remember that team so clearly just had a consistency and an endurance to them that other teams couldn't withstand. And almost every game we'd come to a timeout with 2 minutes left in the game, and our guys would come back and say, that's it. That's all they got. They're done. Like, we got this. Even if it was a 2-point game at the time, and there was a sense that you had, like, that's all they had left in the tank, and we got this now. And we won every game by 7 points, 8 points, 9 points. And it might not look as impressive on the stat sheet or the brackets, but that is an experience and endurance that team had that just wore teams down. And it's okay to have close games. Like, those tournament games are tough. Any team could have beaten us. A couple of shots could have gone either way, and we could have lost in the Sweet 16. People would have seen that as a very different outcome than the year before. But, we just had the guys, the confidence and the ability to go grind through those last 4 minutes of the game. And that's when the elite teams really show up and separate themselves from the others. But yeah, to the point of winning it that year, it definitely was a sense of relief because of that constant pressure the whole year, the whole way through. It didn't, though, I think, diminish any of the joy and excitement and those things, but there's just kind of more different emotions at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, what a span of 3 years there. I mean, you go from just being a young kid hoping to make the team to, playing an integral role on a just maybe behind the scenes a little bit more too. There's 2 quick questions I want to ask you too. One is, what was the deepest that you played in the tournament? Because I got to tell you, my dad and I screaming at the freaking screen to put you in the damn game. Like, can we just get you some run in the finals? You're up by like 20. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah, I could be wrong. It's been a while, but I don't actually recall getting into any of those games, and I was okay with it because, I knew that the role that I served was getting those guys ready for that moment. And again, whether I was on the floor for the last, 2 minutes or not, didn't change, that whole experience.
Yeah. Do you remember texting me at halftime in one of those games?
Yeah.
Do you recall this?
Yeah, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago too.
I can't remember what year it was. I just remember texting you saying, like, what's the vibe in the locker room? And you wrote me back like 4 words, right? And it was like, I don't even remember what it was. I'd be lying if I said I remembered what you said, but I remember it was just short and sweet. I just imagined you like flipping open your Razor phone, like typing in the letters at the time. There wasn't the quick swipes. You had to type T9, you had to type 6 3 times to get to the right letter to write whatever you wrote to me. But I want to formally, I can thank you now. Thank you for including me in, as being a part of that championship. But do you remember that story?
And that was one of the things about Billy that I always just admired. First of all, the preparation I talked about a little bit earlier. For any game, we always felt like we were there and we were on top of any moment heading into the game. But, there were times where another team would surprise us or do something we weren't expecting or, gain some advantage in the first half on us. But he was always able to assess that in the moment and make the right adjustments going into the second half. So even if somebody got something past us in the first half, he was always able to go make that correction on the fly and make the right adjustments, which it's not easy to do in the moment like that, but great coaches are able to, of course.
Yeah, that's just a testament. And he's obviously still coaching now. So you end up winning the title. First of all, you also got to go to the White House twice. Can we talk about this? I was Googling your name. I see a freaking picture of you next to, was it George Bush? Was he in the office then? I mean, what? Yeah. What was that like? You got to go to the what was all that extracurricular stuff like after you win these titles? I mean,
there was a lot of that.
What's like the coolest thing you remember being able to do? Was it going to the White House? Because that feels like it'd be pretty cool to go do. Was there something else?
That is pretty cool. I'm not going to downplay that. I don't think I ever would have gone to the White House otherwise. So, it was a long day though. I remember we had a pretty early flight and there was a lot of waiting around in some of the side rooms until the actual event. They called it like a Champions Day and had other teams and other sports and things like that were getting recognized. But I don't know, funny moment. We're just kind of in one of these back rooms and we're all, tired, and we've been out the night before and things like that. And, we've been in this room for about an hour already. There's nice chandeliers from the ceiling. We've got some tall guys, maybe Joe Kim in particular is, grabbing some of this crystal from the chandelier due to the AK-47 at the door, just shakes his head. He's like, I wouldn't do that. All right. I get it. I don't know. Just those guys were so entertaining off the floor that, traveling together and just the jokes and the conversations and all that was, so much of the fun. Of course, going into the, opposing arenas and winning games and on the road was always a blast, but, just it was a unique, fun, interesting group of guys and just enjoyed all of it.
Yeah. And you also, other fun fact here, believe you led the team out, correct? In a special, was this a dunk every game?
Well, yeah. So my first year playing, Matt Walsh, first game, we're in the tunnel about to run out onto the floor for the first game. And Matt Walsh was a senior at the time and he hands me the basketball and he's like, all right, lead us out there. And I was like, what? He's like, just go.
Don't fall. Do not trip.
So that was really cool thing that he was, pushing me to go do, but ended up, every game for the rest of my career, leading our team out of the tunnel when, the announcer, on the microphone, like, here come the Gators. And he would always time it right as I'm taking off and like dunking that first one. And that would kind of get us into our warm up every day. So that's pretty cool.
Awesome. Did you ever miss a dunk in the warm up?
I don't recall missing any, but okay. Yeah, I would always
just making sure.
We always had that short window before the referees came out where you were allowed to dunk. So we'd try to get them in early and then the refs would come out and you weren't allowed to dunk anymore in warm-ups, but we would get them in early.
Smart. Yeah. And on my freshman basketball days, my only year of basketball I played in high school, I didn't have a chance to dunk, just I didn't want to get in trouble. Had nothing to do with the fact that I'm 5'8" on my best day and would never have a chance of seeing a rim close without a ladder. But okay, yeah. So you end up winning back to back. All that's awesome. You end up not coming back to play which would have been your fifth year at that point, right? Like, was that tough not to do that, or what was your thought there? Hey, I want to finish this thing out, or?
Yeah, so that would have been my fifth year at Florida, fourth year of eligibility, and every single guy on the team after that year had either graduated or gone to the NBA. Maybe a guy or two transferred. There was literally nobody left on the team the next year from that year. And I felt like I had gotten everything you could possibly get out of a college basketball experience. And I'd honestly, not committed to trying to play basketball after college. NBA was obviously not a reality. Yes. Maybe could have made a run at trying to play overseas somewhere, but I was in civil engineering and then eventually construction management classes. And I knew that's what I wanted to do after school. So I had that fifth year after leaving the team to still be at UF and do all the things that I hadn't gotten to do as a college, student for the past 3 years. The team's a 24/7, 365 job. So there's just a lot of things that you don't get to do, but caught up on that my fifth year and graduated and, went into my career that I'm in now. So
that's great. Let's jump into the things that I would not make you do that. Yeah. So, I mean, I know we've been going here for a while. We're at an hour 30. So I appreciate everybody sticking with us too. It's just such a fascinating story to talk through. And, selfishly, I could talk to you about this for probably another 2 hours, but
for sure.
Just two things that I'm sure people are thinking about too is I'll start with the first. Do you still talk to any of the guys? I mean, you got NBA players all over the place, Billy Donovan, like, do you guys get together ever for reunions? And what's your relationship like with all these guys now that you're like you said, you're 40, you got 3 girls, you have an extremely successful career. Like, do you still check in with the guys and fire any texts off now that the Gators are kind of back again?
Yeah, it's tough. We have had the reunions, the 10 year, the 20 years coming up actually, which is wild. I was roommates with one of the managers on the team. He and I stay in touch more frequently than the others. While the others were still playing, I would always try to go, see their games and connect with them when they were coming through whatever city I was in. But it's been, a little while since I've talked to the rest of them most recently, but we do have some more reunion stuff coming up here soon. So looking forward to that. But yeah, and they've had some great careers and they're on doing some other things now, but it's been fun to watch.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, and I think we can, I kind of want to wrap on this topic because I think this is the most important is while basketball was such an incredible part of your life, you obviously have had an extremely and amazing life after basketball, right? So like you said, you're living in Texas, have a very great career, beautiful family, 3 beautiful daughters. You have an incredible wife. You have, like I said, really awesome career following kind of in your dad's footsteps and really wanting to kind of be in the construction area. I mean, how often do you think about these championship runs? And just as an adult now, looking back as a young kid that didn't really know what the hell was going on probably at the time, how do you think this has shaped you as a person?
Yeah, I think about it a lot, actually, especially this time of year in March, it brings all those memories back. But, talked about being around Billy and a leader and trying to soak up, what I had learned from him. I do remember very specifically in the interview that I had coming out of college for the company that I'm with now. I've, been with this same company since graduating in Florida. So June will be 17 years here. But
wow.
In that interview, they, asking all kinds of questions. And I just found myself referring back to the experiences that I had on that team over and over again, and the leadership qualities that Billy had, and the concept of having roles and people having different roles on a team and understanding that dynamic. And I remember saying, I'm not trying to keep throwing the basketball thing out there in this interview, but I have just learned so much from that experience. And now, the position I'm in, we've got some really large teams doing some of these large projects that we're doing now in teams of 50, 60 associates, and the concepts that we lived and learned on that team have carried right into the things that I'm doing now, even though it's a totally different industry and working for a general contractor, building some large data centers and things like that. But, the team dynamic and understanding how to put people in a position to be successful and facing adversity and being able to deal with change and circumstances that are out of your control and having the choice in how you respond to those things, like all of that comes directly from that experience in college, and just try to apply that directly to what we're doing now.
Yeah, and I also see you're giving the subtle flex with those rings on your on your hands here. That was a nice subtle drop for you there. Come on. Are these like daily? Look at that. It was like Charles Barkley in here, except Barkley's got no an NBA champions rings to show off. But do you wear those daily? What's the status of the rings? Do those make an appearance all the time?
That's usually only in March. They're March rings. Yeah.
Okay. Because I also remember you saying when you first got them, I believe you were on an airplane early on, right? Weren't you getting upgraded to first class because you had a natty ring
actually.
on?
I had forgotten about that, but I was wearing the ring, and that happened. Got the bump to first class, so that was pretty cool.
Unbelievable. You can throw one of those my way, all right? I'm the jackass sitting in 37F shoved in the window. You're up there getting, Mr. Tyler, can we move you up to first class? Oh, thank you. I mean, this was great. Obviously, Florida's rolling right now. I'd be remiss if I didn't give the thought here of what's your take on March so far. You think this is the year for the Gators? They've been rolling. They got a deep team. I mean, what's the vibe for? Is this the year Florida returns to the national championship prowess? The first time since you were not there, right? This is it.
Yeah, they are the real deal. You mentioned the depth, but we've got the experience in the backcourt. Those guards are, all legit. It's nice to have a few different weapons, but gosh, Walter Clayton, he is a weapon.
He's good.
If you need a bucket late, that's a trustworthy source. I love our bigs. I love that we've got athletic bigs that can run the floor and rebound, and a couple of them are knocking down threes. It's a tough team to go up against, but honestly, they very well could lose against Maryland, and that not be entirely shocking. Any team that's in the Sweet 16 is there for a reason. And at this point, anybody can go win any game that they're playing. So that's what I love about this time of year. Anybody can beat somebody else once. And you see a lot of that right now. But yeah, it's exciting.
We just had a pretty intense conversation in our episode we released yesterday about Michigan State. I mean, I know obviously your parents are huge Michigan State fans, right? Both alums there. Your dad obviously loves Michigan State, played baseball. I actually see a lot of parallels between the Florida team and Michigan team. I would argue they're maybe two of the deepest teams in the tournament. Sure. I think they match up really well against each other, actually, because they just have so much depth. They can run 10, 12 guys at you, right? Just because and I think they're like that to me is a weapon in March. It's not this, we got our 3 stars and that's it. When you can, I mean, Tom Izzo's checking guys, an entire group of guys in, which you don't see in college basketball anymore. We're subbing 4 guys at one time. Same with Florida. It's anyways, we were just talking about how any given night, to your point of, we only won by 9. Like, this team's horrible. I mean, we were just talking about Michigan State. Wilson was saying, like, man, they haven't looked too great, gotten off to slow starts. It's like, at the end of the day, if you're getting a dub, you're getting a dub, right?
That is all that matters right now. And, Michigan State and Florida both had very tough games, to get to the Sweet 16. Both of them were down in the games, but again, it's that experience. And I think the leadership from the coaches shows through there, to be at your best in the last 4 minutes when it matters the most is really all that matters right now. And if you get a win, whether it's by 1 or 40, doesn't matter. You're moving on to the next round. And if the teams can, get through games where they're not playing their best and still win those games, that's what it takes right now. But yeah, it's anybody's tournament.
Yeah. And just us talking makes me realize how unique it is to be able to go on, back-to-back runs and win back-to-back titles. And you realize why it's such a unique, situation to happen. You saw the stats I rolled to start the show, kind of ending with that. Just a unique situation it is. And I think it also gives me a little bit of perspective too, as an avid sports fan. And I know you listen to this podcast a lot. I'm hard on athletes sometimes, I expect perfection, and it's probably a good reality check too of it's okay sometimes to say we still got the dub. It's all right if it didn't look perfect, but you're still playing and you're still moving on, which I think is just a valuable lesson. And hopefully everybody took something away from our conversation today. Right. But anyways, I mean, this was great. Anything else you want to add? Is there anything I missed? Like, I covered White House. I covered you jamming. I covered every game that you freaking played in. I have the full Garrett Tyler breakdown. Anything else that I missed that you think is worthwhile sharing here? Do you feel like we covered the full profile?
Yeah, no, that was a great conversation. I appreciate the way you tapped into some of those different memories, and I really enjoyed it. I think you guys have come a long way in the way that this podcast has developed. I remember listening to the first episode, and you could just tell how excited you guys were to be doing this podcast. But I love the rhythm that you've fallen into, and you play off each other well. And, really the insight that you guys are providing is top tier. So you can see the passion that you have for Michigan, professional sports and all of them. But, honestly, the insight that you guys are bringing is top tier. So I love listening to it, and keep it up. It's been fun to watch.
I love it. So what you're saying is I'm pretty much equal to like a 0.0002% back-to-back champion is what you're saying?
In my opinion, absolutely.
I love it, G. Well, just know you're always a welcomed guest on the show. So would love to have you come back too. I know Wilson and Steve would love to chat with you at some point too. I think it'd be greater. Now that everybody knows your story too, as we look forward in March, even in the next year, and it'd be great to have you on just kind of annually as we kind of talk about the tourney and just get your take. Cause I think your story is just so powerful. You're such a motivating person. Like I said, you've been a big mentor for me, and I've always looked up to you just pretty much my entire life. And, I think you represent what it means to be an underdog, and you represent a lot of what society doesn't have all the time today, right? Which is you got to put in a lot of hard work. You're not always going to get the show and the fame for it. And I think that was the epitome of kind of your role within the basketball team. And then I look at you now overseeing, hundreds of people and just all the incredible work that you're doing. Your daughters have an incredible role model to look up to. And, I hope everybody enjoyed getting kind of a sneak peek into our family and kind of our life as sports fans. Cause I think it's easy to talk about the professional sports and, sometimes we don't focus on the stories that really matter. Right. So for every LeBron James story, right. For every, Tom Brady story, there's a Garrett Tyler story out there. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that, maybe know somebody like UG that's really gone through a lot and, maybe don't always get the headline. So I just want to thank you too for being on. And we'd love to get you back on the show sometime.
Absolutely. Loved it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening. This was an incredible episode. Make sure you follow us on the socials. We're all over the place. We'll be putting this on YouTube as well. So you can actually see G when he shows off his fancy ass rings that got him first class tickets. But you guys know where to find us. We will be back hopefully next week, maybe celebrating a Gators win, maybe a Michigan State win. We'll see. We'll see. But we'll catch you next time here on Take the Points, a true underdog podcast. Thanks all.